Shabbat Shalom. So here we are on the first Shabbat of 2025, nearing the climactic ending of the unfolding story of Joseph and his brothers. Here's what we need to know. Joseph was Jacob's favorite son. Joseph's brothers hated him. We're just catching ourselves up right now to the same place. Joseph's brothers hated him, sold him into slavery, and lied to Jacob, saying that Joseph had been killed by a wild animal. That happened a bunch of chapters ago. Jacob was utterly heartbroken by this. Meanwhile, Joseph went on in Egypt to be enslaved, and then in prison, and then out of prison, and then he rose to power. And now, we find him second in command of all of Egypt during a great famine in the land. This famine brings Joseph's brothers to Egypt, asking for food for their families. When they come before Joseph to plead their case, they don't recognize him as their brother because he has a beard, and it's been a while. So he messes with them for a bit. In this week's Parsha, Vayigash, Joseph's brothers are standing in front of him for the second time, and finally now, Joseph reveals himself. The first words he speaks are, Ani Yosef, ha'od avi chai. I am Joseph. Is my father still well? He missed him so much. And then he invites his whole family to come and be with him safely in Egypt. When Joseph is finally reunited with his father, he embraces him and he cries and cries and cries. It's a powerful story, but it raises an interesting question that might be helpful to us as we begin this new year. In all of the years that Joseph was in Egypt, why hasn't he made contact with his father? He longed for him constantly, but not once did he reach out. The commentator Chizkuni asks this same question. He says, I have been troubled by the fact that Joseph did not communicate with his father during all those years. Did he not realize that his father must have been in terrible anguish concerning what had happened to him? While it is true that as long as Joseph was a slave, he may not have been able to communicate with his father, nonetheless, during the 9 years since his appointment as viceroy, that's how we say that word, viceroy? Great, good. Surely he could have done so. Why did he not at least write his father a letter to temper his father's pain? This is Chizkuni's question, and it's a good question. You know, here we are just as a new year is beginning, and the secular new year is a really interesting time. It may be lacking the existential accounting of our soul of Rosh Hashanah, but it's often a time of taking stock and personal reflection. There's a tradition of making resolutions. We want to eat healthier, exercise more, go to sleep earlier. Sometimes we succeed, often we don't. But it all draws us to think about who we want to be, what we want to do differently, and maybe especially why we don't do what we don't do. Why we often don't do the things that we know we most want to do. Not just the resolution things, but the things that are tugging at us, that we feel called to do in our kishkas, or to be, but often decide, no, that's not me. Or we just wait it out, making no decision at all. But it's there, the thing that we long for, or the things that we're at least curious enough about that they occupy our nighttime minds. But we find ways to let time roll on, or we make great excuses, and we hesitate, we perseverate, we resist. In this time of new beginnings, the first Shabbat of 2025, it's a good time to wonder why we don't do the things we don't do. And what if we did? This is the question that's put to Joseph. Why doesn't he do what he doesn't do? We know his heart was longing for his father. It was just a 6-day journey. He was right there. Surely he felt a pull in his kishkas to contact him, but he did not. Chizkuni comes up with a lot of good reasons for this. He suggested that Joseph was afraid of the risk involved, that his brothers would try to kill him if they found out that he was alive. Or maybe that Joseph was worried that his good intentions would result in a terrible outcome, like if Jacob, learning the truth about his brothers, cursed them and they died. That would be Joseph's fault. Or Chizkuni suggests maybe Joseph didn't want to cause any further pain by bringing his brothers low in the eyes of his father, so he sacrificed himself to protect their dignity. Modern commentator Rabbi Yoel ben Nun adds that because Joseph didn't know his brothers told their dad that he was killed by a beast, maybe Joseph thinks that Jacob knew that he was there in Egypt this whole time, and he simply never came to get him. So he didn't reach out to him because he thought his father would reject him. So many excellent and familiar reasons to not do the things that we don't do. Not wanting to cause pain for others, fear of getting hurt, physically or emotionally, thinking we'll be judged, fear of rejection, fear of failing. The status quo is so much more comfortable, even when our bellies or our hearts are tugging at us to do something differently now. What is tugging at you this new year? There's a lot ahead of us that's worth being concerned about. But there's also a lot ahead of us that could be opportunities to do the thing that is calling to us. Is there a person in your kishkas that are telling you to reach out to heal something? Will you wait 9 long years to reach to them? Or are your kishkas pulling you towards a new direction in your life, a letting go, or a being all in? As we gaze towards the coming chaos of this year, there will also be countless things inviting us to be part of making a difference. Are your kishkas pulling you towards standing up or showing up or putting your hand in the air to try to help in a way you've never done before? Maybe you've gotten 4,000 emails about ways to get involved, and you want to, but have thought, oh, that's not me. No, I don't think so. I'm on the outside. People will think I'm being weird. I could get hurt. That's for other people to do. Why we don't do the things that we don't do. But what if we did? What if we saw an email come in that said that on Monday, January 20th, we're building furniture for refugees and asylum seekers, and you felt a little tug, and then you started to come up with the many reasons that you're not going to say yes, but then maybe you thought of Joseph. Imagine if he had done what he spent 9 years wanting to do. Maybe he would have cut his loneliness and hopelessness short by years. Maybe he would have changed his story. What if we reached towards the person that we're missing? Could it cut our loneliness? Could it change our story? Could it change the story that we tell children generations from now? What if we clicked the box that committed us to showing up, to be part of something? Could it cut short our feelings of hopelessness? Could it change our story? Might we meet someone there or learn something there that changes our path? Could it change our whole life? You know, there are 2 other commentators from our tradition that weigh in on this. They are Amy Ray and Emily Saliers. In the Talmud, they're known as the Indigo Girls. They wrote a song with these lyrics: up on the watershed, standing at the fork in the road, you can stand there and agonize until your agony's your heaviest load. There will be decision points in the year ahead that could be watershed moments, that could change our whole story if we were just to do the thing. There will be tugs at our hearts or our kishkas where we could go this way or that way or no way. And it's true, we could hesitate and agonize and choose no. But if at that fork in the road we say yes, We stand up, or we show up, or we reach out, or we heal a rift, or we say, even if that's not me, or I could get hurt, or maybe I'll fail, or maybe I'll feel out of place. I'm going to do the thing that I don't do because I don't want this regret anymore. If at the watershed we do what Joseph never did, it could change everything about our year, about our story, about the story that we tell generations from now, how we did the thing we always didn't do or thought we couldn't do. What is your longing right now? What will be your watersheds this year? What is absolutely unlike you, but it turns out is very much like you? What is tugging at you? May we learn from Joseph's hesitations that they are not the only way. And may we better understand why we don't do the things that we don't do, and then surprise ourselves by doing them. And may our Kishkas be proud of us in 2025. Shabbat Shalom.